right, we're all in.
What's going on? Come on in there. Here's coffee. So the reality was we weren't making them right. So that's what was up with the PLAs. Somebody just asked me the other day, what was our strategy for chips? Who decided how this technology ran and got used and stuff? And the answer was after Chuck Peddle and his crew left. Does everybody know who Chuck Peddle was?
Yeah.
Yes, right. Part one, right? So that's what I said. By the way, this is the way I was telling Evan about Commodore. This is like the Greek tragedy in 3 acts, right? So there's the Peddle act, and that's the Camelot phase. And then we get to this middle phase. I call it the Wild West phase. This is for long-haired kids like me, roam the halls and did things. And if you talk with too many of the old Commodore people, I don't know if you've noticed it, but they're all kind of sad.
You mean sad and geek or sad and upset?
Sad. We watched our best friend die, right? We watched something. We're watching Apple rewrite history. Oh, we're the first. Yeah, and yet they won, right? I have one, and I'll tell you, my first Apple, it was tough. It really was. So we were pretty sad. I mean, it was a train wreck in slow motion after Jack Trimble left. So let me get to the, see, you turned me way off the game. All right. So I'm going to start from the beginning, just sit back at the beginning. There were unicorns. Who were the unicorns? All right. So we decided to do the 128. Now, and I've said that the 128 was like a 5-pound bag with 9 pounds of poop in it. You've heard the joke that 10 pounds of poop and 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. I couldn't quite get the 10th pound in there. So it's 9 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag. And again, what we're trying to do is we're under the gun. We've got this time limit of 5 months, but there's nobody telling us we can't. We invented it, and management went, oh, look what we did. Oh, look what we're doing now. I mean, we're moving at the speed of light, right? So I got this MMU. The C128 would have been the first one with a memory management unit, except I left out a mode called supervisor mode. So it's not, it came close to being the first home computer with an MMU. And then, anybody use that CPM cartridge, the Z80 cartridge? No. You ever see it for the Commodore 64? Yeah. It didn't work all the time. I would argue that since it didn't work all the time with the C128, I was 100% compatible. I couldn't go there. The real problem with the CPM cartridge was it needed an extra half amp of power. Now, you know the Commodore 64 supplies. Yeah. What happens? They're warm, right? Yeah. It's hot early on. Well, if you used an extra half amp from a Commodore 64 supply, it just got hotter. Voltage come down. Worked less. It's only 20 minutes before crashing instead of 30, right? So there's no big. But with the 128, we had gone to a switching supply, and I did something else. And now remember, I'm in my mind, I'm trying to break some rules. I put a fuse in. They took the fuse out, and I put the fuse back. I learned to speak Japanese, so I could tell them, put the fuse back. I mean, seriously, I got to know the engineers in Japan. I started going over there. I had them in my house. So this cycle of blaming each other, we were trying to break it. Jacksonville really is gone now. Let's talk about getting along. And the chip guys and the programmers hated each other. And if you talk with the chip guys, oh, chips. But here's what I did. I got him in a room. I said, you, pointing at Terry Ryan Trickle, you're going to tell him, Dave Dior, the chip guy, everything you want. Tell him now. I need a Z clock. I need a new pin for the caps lock key because that's always on. You got it. I said, in exchange, you're going to fix all of his problems at the last minute. Right? Because we can't do the chip set. And they got it. I think they did. And they understood that that they were the last line of defense. And so we were getting along. I had gone to MOS, my second week there, Shiraz Shipsy had said, go downstairs and make a deal about DRAMs. I go downstairs. Shiraz, come back! I don't know anything. The running joke with Shiraz was, if you pass him in the hallway or something like that, you see something like that. If you were stupid enough to pick it up, it'd be your job assignment. He'd come in. You could be the busiest guy in the lab. He'd come in the lab, and you'd see us going out the lab like this. I'm not kidding. We'd go around and come back in behind him and go back to work. So, you know, it's a little thing to learn to do to not be pulled off. I mean, we had schedules. So he set me down to talk about DRAMs. And again, I'm a long-haired kid. I'm not in school, but I taught myself during the 2 weeks I was there. I got into somebody's papers, and I learned a notation for min and max timing, how to do it. Only the guy I was looking at was trying to prove that no Commodore product would ever work. So he's always added in the fudge factor. Well, I wanted it to work, so I took it out and put in a real value. I understood the real numbers. And I had this HP calculator I was really proud of. It cost me $100 or $200, and it was a reverse Polish notation. The only thing was, it was the 0.15-inch LEDs. Anybody remember those real small LEDs? Yeah. You had to twist it till the LEDs stopped flicking on and off, and that'd be your answer, right? So, I love this calculator. So I go into this meeting, and the guys are throwing out, well, if you have a RAS pre-charge time, but we subtract the pins, like, oh, take it away. And they answer, well, or we could do the thing and bang it away, and then the calculator died. It was only good for about 10 minutes in fact. I don't want to tell them, look, I'm useless without my calculator. That just messes people. These are the test engineers from Commodore, the actual process engineers from MOS. And so I started looking up. I'm going like this, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, they just moved in their seats. I said something else, and I'm like, they're playing poker. This isn't about the timing, they're hiding something. So I said, you know, Greg Cloud, what's going on? Well, tell me what you need, I'll tell you what I can get back. And they're like, they didn't want to tell me, because they were in this blame game before that we lost millions in production, thousands, because. And finally, he said, well, we made the chips wrong. We can't meet the timing. I said, okay, I can live with that if we do this. And we walked out of the meeting, so thank God my calculator broke. Because I had never noticed what was really on their mind. So I walked out of there having already made inroads at the process design house. So I could call these guys and say, you know, I screwed up. Can you make the process hotter or something like that? So we were trying to break down all these you know, this who blamed who for something. And again, you know, millions that are at stake, there's a lot going on. So we, one of the things, then, so we've got 5 months to get all these chips, and we can't wait for the chips to be done. This is going into 85 CES, 86. We can't wait for the chips to be done, for the programmers to start writing the code. The chips are probably going to get done the day or the week of CES. So we would make these towers, and there's bigger towers than this. This is a big tower or something. These plugged into the boards up to the last minute, and they emulated chips. So you actually couldn't see the C128 board underneath everything. You saw these towers. And the towers didn't quite work either. I find that programmers like spraying them with cold spray and stuff. So right up to the last minute, we're flying on a wing and a prayer that we're going to pull this off, that we're going to make these chips work in spite of themselves. And we get to what's going to be the last rev of the PLA. Remember, we're working on the PLA because it's vulgar. It doesn't work at all. Boom. All I do is I change 4 little terms. Boom, it doesn't work. I knew it wasn't the terms. I measure between the pins on one side. I mean, I'm an engineer. If you stick around for 8-bit, I'll tell you how I did it with the chip. I found 200 ohms on one side of the chip, 200 ohms between each pin. It's shorter across all the pins. And I knew that they had been working on something called a back bias generator, which is a process where they use less power if you make the voltage lower, all these things clamp off tighter, right? If you leave your inmost switches on or a little fuzzy, some current leaks through, because you can only get 0 to 2. But if you have a negative 4 volts, now that's 6 volts. They like cooler, right? Well, that ring had moved in the database of the IC and shorted across all those pins. remember some of this blame technology, or blame whose department? The manager of the PLA, with his minion standing behind him, one of the tech guys. There was no change, we didn't read. I'm watching this guy's face turn red, and I'm starting to smile, because I know who to blame now, right? And remember, middle managers everywhere. This guy's name was Ball Peen. But I tried to hit him with a ball peen here. And he didn't even know I was real, you know. The reason I did that was he had sat in a meeting for 45 minutes criticizing how my MMU worked, and then he said, and I swear he started the sentence with the word duh. He said, duh, I guess I don't know what an MMU does. And that's why I'm going to go get a ball peen hammer, and I'm going to hit you in the head with it 2 or 3 times. And that's pretty good. So Ball Peen is standing there, and the guy behind him is turning red. And the guy behind him pushes his chair back out of the Calma section and goes, the back bias generator moved in the database, shorting out the, you know, I mean, the guy knew he had the goods on it, right? So what we did was we made a tower to the tower that put, like, these line drivers that would drive these 200 ohms. We'd still get a logic level through this 200 ohms. And so it got one. So that's the kind of thing we would run into on the way to the CES show. Again, we have 5 months to do all this. So let me pick out a couple other stories here for you. So one of the things that happened in the 128 design phase was the processor at one point would crash. Oh, I gotta come back to the C8. But the processor went up and crashed. But it didn't crash. Where it crashed was not the accident. It's like, picture a sniper shot the driver. It goes about a mile and goes off the road finally. Why had to go find this sniper? I didn't know. In my logic analyzer window was only good for about 20 yards of the road, if we keep that reference. But I knew at some point during the crash that an @ sign would appear on the screen. I mean, you go, you ever see a Commodore, you know, when they click on the screen? Whereas an @ sign would appear in this one case, and I circled it. I put the light pin on, and I stuck the light pin to the analyzer. So as soon as that @ sign, it triggered, and I looked, and so now I'm way back here on the road near when it crashed, or when the driver got shot. I found it on the 3rd time, and basically, here's the kind of thing we're fixing. When we went to write an FFFE, a lot of ones, right? 1 0. It turned into an FFFF. The ground came up. When we put that many ones into the multiplexes of DRAM, ground wasn't ground anymore. It was more like a spring. And we fixed it. We fixed that in 2 hours. There was no problem we didn't fix overnight in one night. So that was called a ground lift problem. So that was just typical. We did that, you know, that's like November 22nd. So what was on for November 23rd? So the Z80 though, getting back to that. There was so I couldn't do this half amp thing. And so I looked at putting the Z80 into the 128. And turns out we found some other things. I'm trying to remember all 3 things. But I liked fixing multiple problems with one fix, right? Well, so we stick the Z80 in there. And we did a telex from Commodore Australia. Saying, remember telexes? Saying that if we leave that in there, they will personally drill out each board and remove the Z80. And to a young kid, it's like, we're leaving that thing in there, sorry. So then the guys from Magic Voice, these TI Speak and Spell guys show up with their cartridge, and they plug it in, and it goes, the heck, right? Well, they were toggling a signal that most things, it's called the gain line, if you know your cartridges. Right. That was meant to be soldered low or soldered left loading. It was never meant to be toggled. And so we go, you there? And so we go to jump to the reset vector and go, ha, we're here. And it crashed the computer. And you say, but it works on a 64, you know, I couldn't argue with that. And so what we did, everybody goes home that night, you know, all the management. And we taught the Z80 to start first. We just shorted around the inverter to Z80 start with reset line low, 6502 start when it's high. We made them this way, and we hand punched in the code for the Z80. And the morning time comes, and the Z80 wakes up and goes, "There's that cartridge out there." He would set up the MMU and jump to 64 mode. So that's like November 23rd. So we're getting too used to this, fixing everything once a night. You know, and we're living in the lab. Greg Berlin, the guy who designed the 1571, he would put his head down on the hard drive to hear if the stepper motors were still stepping. He'd find him asleep on his hard drive because it'd be warm and vibrating. And we'd like leave sandwiches for him. He'd wake up, you know, like I still do that to my dog. You know, I put the where he could smell it and watch him like that. So, you know, I ate Christmas dinner years in a row. We found that if you put your like turkey in aluminum foil and stuff, we keep it warm on a 1571 hard drive. So that was kind of the life in the fun. And then the final quick story I'll talk about later. Oh, so the Z80. So it turns out we fixed a lot of problems by putting the Z80 in there because I only used a 0.1 amp. We found all the problems why the cartridge didn't work. We saved the power reduction. So we ended up with our first dual processor where I'll tell you it was better than the 6809. You know, this thing could really run at full speed and everything. And you mix CPM with it, and we had this 80 column. So we were looking at the first computer now had an 80 column and the regular TV screen. And remember, we were just trying to get you used to new stuff. You know, I've got 5 months to do this. 80 column screens. Remember, we didn't have those at home. I was actually told to make it so it wouldn't work on the monitor that was available back then, so that we'd sell more monitors. The problem was that monitor didn't sell for a year afterwards. And so, because what I did was, I kept putting my boss off. He got fired before I had to show him that I followed his instructions. So, and actually, I can show that to you. So, about this time, this was, look how huge that is. This is the one right before FCC. That change I was just talking about was done with the transistor, actually. Because what happened then by this time was, when I took the CS show, I went to FCC and I sold, because now I'm into that. Well, once you've told the FCC where your chips are, you can't move them around. So I did all the changes. If you look at this later, you'll see there's wires and there's transistors. I did all my changes with transistors. So, because you could add those without telling the FCC about it. And so that changed, I lied to my boss, and it's there. So, he tried to fire me in a second time. What was that? I'll have to think of that. Yeah, because that time he definitely said, fix it or you're fired. So during this time, we go to the CES show with Commodore 128. Now we had an 8-column chip that didn't work. The guy who did it had done the 68,000, he had done cells for wonderful processors, so we thought, and so they come to me and said, do you want this 80-column chip out of the Z8000? Because so he decided not to make the Z8000. I said, sure, it doesn't act like a 6845, and they said, yeah, and I should have checked, it does. And it did a lot of bad things, like after it was done moving 256 characters, which is totally useless, because the rows, 2.5 rows, I mean, why not move the whole screen, you know, with one thing? You couldn't, there was no interrupt. It wouldn't tell you it was done, right? And the engineer told me, well, you just stop what you're doing and check. I'm like, no, wait a minute. How do you know when somebody calls you on the phone? We started doing that. Everywhere. We're at the bar. They're wondering why the Commodore guys keep hanging around the payphone picking them up. And we'd be in a meeting, and everybody be serious. And we just stop. Wait a minute. No, nobody there. Yeah, I mean, we were really trying to get through this. So meanwhile, the guy that developed CPM, he had stopped trying. We're on Rev 8 or 9 of this of the 80-column chip, and he had stopped trying to keep up with it. And what he had done was he had taken an earlier one and took. Do you remember Mr. Popcorn, hot butter popcorn makers? He had one of those. He had a little butter cup that was in there. He would put an ice cube on it, and set it on his chip. And he could write CPM code then for about 20 minutes, and he'd have to go get another ice cube. We get to the CES show, and we let him see what a real chip is. Now, meanwhile, I've only got like 4 chips that work, every day people are showing up, you know, when somebody get off the plane in Vegas, they show up and they have like a velvet pillow with another chip on it. So we showed them what it was. There had been a change. You had to write to the register twice. We called it the Texan double write, because it's got to be Texan. I mean, do it now. And he found that if you wrote it twice, sometimes it worked better. And so that became a requirement. So Von Ertlein, the guy who wrote CPM, he gets to the show, and the CPM doesn't work, and a third of the booth is dedicated to CPM. This man sat down, and he can't write CPM. That takes all these computers you can't carry, but he had a disk editor, and he figured out the instructions to do it. Then he figured out how to do it so the checksum was exactly the same. And then he figured out to write it the sector backward, and then write the code backward, and then the sectors backward, and he hand-edited a disk the night of CES show in this little, there's a picture of the room on C128.com. And he saved the CPM thing by being able to, like, I mean, true programming, right? Like, you just don't. And so that was Von Ertlein did that, and you know, hand-edited a disk the night of the CES show. The way we had the 8080 column chip worked was the week of Christmas, and CES was January 5th. Was I realized that the chip guys weren't going to do another rev in time. We had this big jar of chips, and guess how many good ones were in here? The answer was none. I don't count them. There wasn't a single good chip in there. The first line would sparkle and stuff like that, and I found if I cranked it up to 575 volts and put 220 ohm pull-ups and everything get hot, I could make it stop sparkling and stuff. But the problem was they had their own clock. If you look at the board, they've got a crystal, we've got a crystal. He did the synchronization wrong. He didn't do it at all. And there's this thing that says, you know, picture you're walking through a revolving door, and you don't get through, but your boxes do, and they land in the lobby. That's what was going on. Data was getting through with no address getting through no data. Sometimes it just crashed. And he went to show us that his worked and crashed right in front of everybody. So we built a tower, we built a PC board. This was 1 week to CES with a phase lock loop on it. And we phase locked it to 16 megahertz. We phased it to the 14.318 megahertz. And Freddie Bowen wrote the code that initialized the phase lock loop. And so we saved CES again with a week ago, right? And so we're doing this nightly. And I'll tell you what, my heart can take that kind of stuff. But I was young, you know, I lived for it. My record was 11 days without leaving the plant. I had an air mattress under my bed. And my girlfriend was on the technician's time, and I would go wake her up and go, here's the instruction, and I'd hot bump, basically. She'd wake me back up 3 or 4 in the morning, and I'd test whatever it is. And that was the cycle of everything worked the next morning. And then I'd sleep, right? When the managers come in and go running around, I want to know answers and stuff like that, I'd be asleep, right? I wouldn't try and come out of my office about 10 or 11. I had a sign on the door that said, you must be, you ever see those things that say, you must be this tall or ride this right? Mm-hmm. Well, I had 3 different signs that said, you must be at least a manager to wake me up, you must be at least a director to wake me up, or you must be at least a vice president to wake me up. You know, how much, and nobody abused it. I would pick the sign that said how much I needed my sleep and put it on the door. Now, we had one engineer that did that. He didn't shower. We gave him T-shirts, and we loved the guy. But I wasn't him. And so if you got to Commodore too early, you'd find me standing in the bathroom. They turned off the hot water at night. And so I go to the vice president's coffee pot, and I fill this tub up with hot water. And I'd be standing there doing a little bird bath. You know, red bikini underwear. I was 22, right? I used to see people come walking back out of the bath. And I just remember, I'd walk in, Joe Mishko, the IT guy, just reminded me the other day we did an interview. He says, yeah, I was one of the guys who'd come up and say, do I smell bad? So, you know, I trust it, because some people I wouldn't ask that, they wouldn't give me a straight answer. So the